In this video, you're going to start part one of a two-part series on geolocation. Instead of just sending text back and forth, we're also going to set it up so I can beam my actual coordinates, my longitude and latitude, to everyone else connected to the chat app. Then we can render a link, and that link could go wherever we like. In our case, we're going to set it up to pull up a Google Maps page where the actual location of the user who sent their location is marked. Now, to actually fetch a user's location, we're going to use the Geolocation API, which is available in your client-side JavaScript, and it's actually a pretty well-supported API. It's available on all modern browsers, whether that's mobile or desktop, and the documentation can be found by Googling Geolocation API and looking for the MDN documentation page. The MDN docs, or the Mozilla Developer Network, they are my favorite docs for client-side technologies. Things like your web APIs, your CSS, and your HTML guidelines. Now, as I mentioned, this is a well-supported feature. You can pretty much use it everywhere except for older versions of Internet Explorer and the Opera Mini browser. But all your major desktop and mobile browsers are going to support this, and if the browser is old, we will set up a little message to let them know their browser does not support geolocation. If you ever want to learn more about geolocation or explore features that we do not cover in the next two videos, you can refer to this page, though we will be using most of the features geolocation has to offer. To get started, what we're going to do is add a new button to our application. It's going to sit alongside of send, and it's going to say something like send location. When the user clicks that send location button, we're going to use the geolocation API, and usually this is going to require the user to confirm they want to share their location with this tab in the browser. That pop-up box is going to happen. It's going to be triggered by the browser. There's no way around that. You're going to need to make sure the user actually wants to share their location. Once you have the coordinates, you're going to emit an event that's going to go to the server. The server is going to send it to all the other connected users, and we're going to be able to render that information in a nice link. Now, we're going to get started in this video, and we'll wrap up the feature in the next one. To kick things off, we're going to add that button. This is going to be the button that starts the entire process. Over inside of Atom, inside of index.html, we're going to add a button just below our form tag. It's going to be outside of our existing form. Right here, we're going to add the button tag, and we're going to go ahead and give this an ID of send location. Now, as for the visible button text, we can go ahead and use send location as our string, save the file, and if we go ahead and refresh our app in the browser, we should now see we have our send location button showing up just below. We're going to fix all this later when we add the default styles, but for now, this does get the job done. Now, clicking this button currently is not going to do anything. It's not tied to a form, so it's not going to do any weird form submissions or page reloads. All we need to do is add a click listener to this button, and we'll be able to run whatever code we like. In our case, we're going to run that geolocation code. This is going to happen over inside of Atom, inside of index.js. We're going to add some code down near the bottom. Now, the first thing I want to do is create a variable, and I'm going to call this variable location button. And this is going to store our selector. This is the jQuery selector that targets the button we just created, because we're going to need to reference it multiple times, and storing it in a variable saves the need to make those calls again. Right here, we're going to call jQuery like we've done for our other selectors, passing in one argument, a string, and we're selecting something by ID, which means we got to start with that £, and the actual ID is send-location. Send-location right here. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and do whatever we like. In our case, what we're going to be doing is adding a click event. We want to do something when someone clicks that button. To get that done, we're going to go to location button.on. Now this is identical to doing the following. jQuery, selecting the ID, send location. Both of these are going to do the same thing. The benefit of the first solution is that we have a reusable variable, which we are going to reference later on. Making two jQuery calls to the same selector, it wastes time because it is going to require jQuery to manipulate the DOM, fetching that information, and that's expensive. Location button .on is going to be our event listener. We're listening for the click event inside of quotes for the first argument, and the second argument, as always, is going to be our function. This function is going to get called when someone clicks the button. For now, all we're going to do is check if the user has access to that geolocation API. If they don't, we want to go ahead and print a message. We're going to create an if statement. The geolocation API exists on navigator.geolocation, and we want to run some code if it doesn't exist. So we're going to flip it. If there is no geolocation object on Navigator, we want to do something. We're going to use return to prevent the rest of the function from executing, and we're going to call the alert function available in all browsers. That pops up one of those default alert boxes that makes you click OK. We're going to use this as opposed to a fancier modal. If you are using something like Bootstrap or Foundation, you can implement one of their built-in tools. For now, though, we're going to use alert, which takes just one argument, a string, your message. Geolocation not supported by your browser. Awesome. And now users who don't have support for this are going to see a little message as opposed to wondering whether or not anything actually happened. To actually fetch a user's position, we're going to use a function available on geolocation. To access it, it's navigator.geolocation.get current position. Get current position is a function that starts the process. It's going to actively get the coordinates for the user. In this case, it's going to find the coordinates based off of the browser. And this takes two functions. The first one is your success function. Right here, we can add our first callback. This is going to get called with the location information. We're going to name this argument position. The second argument to get current position is going to be our error handler if something goes wrong. We're going to create a function right here, and we'll be alerting a message to the user when we're not able to fetch the location using alert. Let's go ahead and call alert a second time, printing a message like unable to fetch location. This is going to print if someone gets prompted to share their location with the browser, but they click deny. We're going to say, hey, we can't fetch the location if you don't give us that permission. Now, the only case left is the success case. This is where we're going to emit the event, but before we do, let's go ahead and simply log it to the screen so we can take a peek at what is happening inside of the position argument. I'm going to log this to the screen. Our server is going to restart, and over inside of Google Chrome, we can open up the developer tools, refresh the page, and we can click that send location button. Now, this is going to work on desktop and mobile. Some mobile browsers are going to require you to be on HTTPS, which is something that we're going to have set up for Heroku. As you know, the Heroku URL is secure, which means it's not going to work on localhost. You can always test your mobile browsers by deploying the app to Heroku and running it there. For now, though, I will be able to click send location. This is going to go ahead and start that process. The process can take up to a second. Now, as you can see, I did get my geolocation position, but I was never prompted as to whether or not I wanted to share my location. That's because I've already given it permission. Over here, I can go ahead and click clear these settings for future visits. This means that I'm going to need to reauthorize. If I refresh the page and click send location again, you're going to see this little box, which is probably going to show up for you. You can either block it. If I block it, it's going to print unable to fetch location, or you can accept it. I'm going to clear those settings one more time, give the page a refresh, and this time I am going to accept the location sharing, and we're going to get the geolocation printing out in the console. Now, once we get it, we can go ahead and dive in. The object itself is pretty simple. We have a timestamp of exactly when we fetch the data. This is useful if you're tracking a user over time, which we're not doing. We also have our coordinates. We have all sorts of properties we're not going to use, like accuracy, altitude, which doesn't exist, and other related ones. We also have speed, which is null. The only two we're ever going to use off this object is latitude and longitude, which do indeed exist. This is the information we want to pass to the server so the server can send it to everybody else. This means we're going to go into the position object, go into the chords object, and grab those two. Let's go ahead and do that over inside of Atom. We are going to call socket.emit, and we're going to emit a brand new event, one we do not have registered yet. We're going to call this one create location message. Create location message is not going to take the standard text. Instead, it's going to take those longitude and latitude coordinates. We're going to specify both of them, starting with latitude. We want to set latitude equal to position dot chords dot latitude. This is the variable that we explored over inside of the console. And we're going to do the same thing for longitude setting it equal to position dot coords dot longitude. Awesome. Now that we have this in place, we can actually go ahead and listen for this event over in the server. And when we get it, all we're going to do is pass this data along to all the connected users. Let's go ahead and do just that over inside of server.js, registering a new event listener. I'm going to remove the old commented out broadcast call. That's no longer needed in create message. And just below create message, we're going to call socket.on again, specifying a listener for this event. Create location message, just as we defined it over inside of index.js. Now we are using ES6 since we're in Node, which means we can go ahead and set up our arrow function. We're going to have one argument. This is going to be the chords. And we can go ahead and finish off the arrow function. And in here, we're going to be able to run whatever code we like. For the moment, all we're going to do is emit a new message event, passing along the coordinates, although in part 2, we'll be making this a lot nicer, setting up that URL for Google Maps. Right now, though, we're going to call io.emit. We're going to emit a new message event, and we're going to go ahead and provide the necessary data by calling generate message. For the moment, generate message is going to take some bogus username. I'm going to go ahead and type in admin, and we are going to set the text. For now, we're simply going to set it equal to the coordinates. Let's go ahead and use a template string to set that up. We're going to first inject the latitude, which is available on chords.latitude. Then we're going to go ahead and add a comma, a space, and we'll inject the longitude. Chords.longitude. Excellent. Now that we have this call in place, the location information is going to get passed back and forth between the users. And we can go ahead and actually prove this. Over inside of the browser, I'm going to give this page a refresh. And I'm also going to open up a second tab. In this second tab, I'm going to click Send Location. It's not going to prompt me if I want to share my location, since I've already told it I do want to share my location with this tab. And right here, you can see we have our admin message and we have our latitude, but unfortunately the longitude is undefined, most likely because we typed it incorrectly somewhere along the way. I'm going to head back into Atom real quick and take a peek. And right here, you can see I forgot the N in longitude. If I go ahead and add that N, save the file, and go back into the browser, we should be able to do this once again, getting both pieces of information. I'm going to refresh both tabs to load the latest version of our index file. Over inside of the first one, we're going to send the location, and the second one is going to be responsible for receiving it. Let's send the location off. Remember, this takes about a second for your browser to get the coordinates. Then it emits the message, and right here, you see we have the coordinates, both the longitude and the latitude. We also have it over inside of the second tab. If I take this information, we can actually Google it and prove that it is working as expected. Now, in the next video, part 2, we're going to be setting up a nice link so this information isn't visible. It'll be there, but the user doesn't really need to know the coordinates. What they really want is a link to a map. That's what we're going to set up. But for now, we can put this in Google. Google is going to show us exactly where it is, and the coordinates are indeed correct. I am in Philadelphia filming this video, which means the location was correctly fetched for these localhost tabs. With this in place, we are now done part 1. We're not going to go ahead and actually make a commit since we're not done with the feature. We're simply going to leave things as they are and move on to part 2. Let's take just a quick moment to recap what we did because we covered quite a bit of new information here. Now, the first thing we did is we gave a new button to the user. This new button is going to allow them to click it to send the location. All of the heavy lifting happened over inside of index.js. In here, we set up a click listener for that send location button, which means every time a user clicks it, we do something. Now, what do? Well, first we make sure they have access to the geolocation API. If they do, that's great. If not, we simply print a message. If they do have access, we go ahead and try to fetch the location. This can either succeed or fail. If it fails, once again, we just give them a little message. If it succeeds, we actually emit an event with the longitude and latitude to the server. The server gets that information and it emits a new message event to all clients, and that renders it to the screen. This is as good of a place as any to stop. We are going to continue on in the next video, wrapping up the geolocation API in part 2. Stay tuned. I'll see you then.